Howdy, folks. Welcome to our December edition of Cattle Trails Showcase. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Mighty glad to be with you. Today, we are zooming to Enid, Oklahoma for a special holiday edition of Cattle Trails Showcase. We like to open our program with a Western trivia question. So here's our question for this month. Continuing our theme from last month when we talked about the TV show Gunsmoke. On Gunsmoke, Marshall Dillon, the main character, had a deputy. And what was the name of the first deputy to Marshall Dillon? He had a different deputy in later years, but what was the name of the character, not the actor, the character who was Marshall Dillon's first deputy? Feel free to enter that in the chat. And we already see, nope, it wasn't. Festus was not the first deputy. I'm looking for Festus was the second deputy. So I'm looking for the name of the first deputy to Marshall Dillon. The purpose of the Cattle Trails Showcase is to highlight the communities, historical elements, museums, and other attractions along the Chisholm and the Western Cattle Trail. Showcase is brought to you by the International Chisholm Trail Association, of which Dennis Katzenmeyer is president, Michael Grauer is vice president, secretary is Nancy Lawrence, and Mary Lou Rivers is treasurer. Lonnie Steedman is our showcase chair, and special thanks to Rob Houston at Enid, Visit Enid, who helped with today's program. So let's jump right into today's program. We're zooming along the Chisholm Trail to Enid, Oklahoma, and the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center, including the Humphrey Heritage Village, site of special celebration this month. We're joined by the center director, Jake Krumwiede. Jake grew up in eastern Oklahoma at Claremore and earned a bachelor's at Rogers State University. Later got his master's at Oklahoma State. Before coming to Enid, he was assistant director of the Will Rogers Museum in Claremore and managed the Will Rogers Birthplace and Ranch. It sounds really interesting. For the past 2 years, he's been director of the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. So Jake, please tell us about the center in Enid and the special happenings in December. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk to all of you today about the Heritage Center and really just what I think is cool about things that I think are cool about northwestern Oklahoma. Like you said, I'm the director here at the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. The Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and the Will Rogers Museum, which is also back in Claremore, where I came from. Claremore was my hometown. That's where I grew up. It's also part of the OHS, and we are all one big happy family. And so I was really pleased to be able to come out here a couple of years ago to be the director of this museum, and I couldn't have asked for a better one to be the director of. It's a really fantastic museum, a really fantastic community here in Enid. If those of you who have not visited, I encourage you to do so. Enid is a cool place, especially this time of year, for a couple things that I'll talk about in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a little bit of a slideshow to go through. It's really just photos for you to look at, but this is one of those opportunities that's kind of a show and tell sort of thing. So if I'm talking about the Heritage Center, I want to show you what it is that I'm talking about. So give me just one moment. And I will. No, that's not what I want. All right, bear with me just one moment. So like I said, the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center, I've been the director here for now a couple of years. And like I said, I've been very pleased to be the director here. So the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center, you can see it there up on the screen. This is a we are a full museum where we have both temporary and permanent exhibit galleries throughout the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. And this facility, it is has permanent exhibits that focus on the people of northwestern Oklahoma. Now, northwestern Oklahoma, what does that mean? What does that encompass? Who are the people of northwestern Oklahoma? What does that look like? It is really our mission this is our mission of our museum, to collect, preserve, and share the history and culture of the Cherokee Strip and northwestern Oklahoma. So we are the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. The Cherokee Strip, or the old Cherokee Outlet, if you were not aware, was essentially what is now northwestern Oklahoma, kind of the north central and northwestern Oklahoma. It was land that was originally granted to the Cherokee Nation as a outlet. The Cherokees had been granted land in eastern Oklahoma, their reservation land that they were permitted to live on after the removal in the early 19th century. And they were also granted an outlet, land that was essentially an outlet out to Western lands. A little bit of history of that. The Cherokees had actually, their ancestral homelands were in the eastern part of the United States, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, kind of in that area. And once settlers, English settlers, started colonizing over here in the New World, a lot of the more conservative Cherokees had already started moving west, going back to the 19th or early 19th and late 18th century. And so, the more people that were coming to the eastern seaboard of the United States, the Cherokees were starting to move further west. And so by the time you got to the 1830s and Andrew Jackson's presidency and the removal of the Cherokees and most of a lot of tribes from the eastern United States to lands west of the Mississippi River, a lot of the Cherokees, before they were removed, a lot of them had already actually been out west. Well, west in that time anyway. A lot of them had already settled in Arkansas. And by the 1830s, I mean, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Texas is starting to be colonized as well, populated with people. So there were already people, those Cherokees that had moved west, there were already people out there surrounding them again. So the purpose of the outlet was, okay, if you're going to give us land, we want to essentially have this piece of land, this outlet that is available where no one can essentially come in and move into our backyard, essentially. And it was also for a lot of other purposes too. Like I said, access to the West, for trade, hunting, really all sorts of things. So they had rights to the land, but they weren't actually permitted to live there. The Cherokee reservation land was in the eastern part of what is now the state of Oklahoma. So the Cherokee outlet, what the Cherokees did with it, would lease it out, for example, to the Cherokee Strip Livestock Association, and there were a lot of ranchers that grazed cattle in the Cherokee outlet. But after the American Civil War, really things started to change, and the access to the or a lot of the land that was in what is now Oklahoma, that had been under the rights of a lot of the different native tribes. A lot of that started to change after the American Civil War, or at least started to more quickly change. Some of it had already been happening. But through a number of different treaties that were renegotiated after the Civil War, a lot of tribes started losing some of the rights to their land, including the Cherokees, and the Cherokee outlet was one of them. So a lot of lands in what is now Western Oklahoma or Oklahoma Territory were opened up for public settlement by land run. So when we talk about the American West and the frontier and the Americans settling, continuing to move west and settling into regions across the Great Plains and beyond. I mentioned Arkansas and Missouri became a state in 1820. Kansas in the 1850s. People had moved west and were already moving further and further west. But Oklahoma was kind of this little bubble where there was no public settlement that was permitted because it had been land that was promised to the native tribes. And so once that started changing, there was a lot of political pressure to open up some of those lands that were becoming available to public settlement. And so when all of essentially the line of the frontier has moved beyond what is now Oklahoma, all of a sudden, all of this region was opened up for public settlement. There was no one there, but there was people all around that wanted in. And so 1893 was kind of a interesting time because the Panic of 1893 happened in March of 1893. The Cherokee Outlet land opening was in September of 1893. So it's not only that there were a lot of people that were looking for land, there was also a lot of people that were actually very desperate for, before the Great Depression, the Panic of 1893 was one of the biggest economic depressions the world had ever seen, or the United States had ever seen. And so there was a lot of people that were out of work out east, looking for a fresh new start. And all of a sudden, you know, all of this land in western Oklahoma territory is being opened up for public settlement. It drew a lot of people out to the territory to make the run. And so why land run? You know, that's the real question, right? It's essentially it's a first come, first serve system. You had more people than land available. And so that's why the land run was an imperfect system. It was a flawed system, certainly, as people started to discover. But you know, there was approximately 70,000 parcels of land that were available, and we don't know exactly how many participated in the run itself, but it's estimated over 140,000. So there was way more people than land available. And so that's really the story of this museum, is starting with that moment in time. And like I said, focusing on the people and the culture of northwestern Oklahoma. You know, we do tell the story a little bit of what happened beforehand, before 1893, you know, give context. But really, it's from that point on is what our museum does. It tells the story of once this area was opened up for public settlement, what did that start to look like? Like I said, this was in the midst of one of the biggest economic depressions the world or the country had ever seen up until that point. And a lot of people were trying to build a new life for themselves, start farms, family farms out here in the Great Plains. And the Great Plains is one of those regions that it's hard if you don't exactly know what you're doing, or you're just trying to start something from nothing. The Great Plains is a region that has just enough rainfall for it not to be a desert, but it makes it difficult to start something out of nothing, like I said. So there were a lot of people who might have been laborers or railroad employees or something back east that had come out here, lots of immigrants coming from all over the world, for that matter, to start to build a new life. And just so happened in the midst of all of that, there was also a drought that was happening too. So September 16th, 1893 is also kind of a hard time to be starting a family farm if you're going to be expecting to hope to survive through the next winter and beyond. So there was a lot of people that made the run. Like I said, we estimate maybe 140,000. There's only 70,000 parcels of land. And those people that did make claims in this region, they didn't necessarily all make it. And I don't mean necessarily that they all died, even though some certainly did. but a lot of them just abandoned their claims or sold off the rights to their claims because they just couldn't make it. And so it's estimated after 5 years or so, there was only about 20% of the original people that made the run that were still there. So it was a really hard time in those first few years of the opening of the Cherokee Outlet. So our museum has exhibits that focus on that experience. What was life like for these settlers that were coming out to this region? It's the Great Plains. Even though our region has changed a little bit over time, there's more trees. We have new ways of moving water from one place to another, irrigating water, and also water pipelines going from lakes to bring water to Enid, for example. None of that infrastructure existed. So there were not as many trees back then as there are now. And so a lot of people lived in these sod homes, as we have depicted here in our exhibit. So really, our exhibits tell the story of the people of northwestern Oklahoma and that struggle for survival, starting in 1893 and going beyond. And not just survival, but at some point, especially once oil was discovered, we shifted from the point of learning how to survive to a region that was learning how to thrive. You have a region that where people were living in those sod homes to within a couple of decades living in these beautiful palaces on the plains, from a lot of these people that were making a lot of money in oil. So there was a lot of change, a lot of social change that was happening in that time period too. So it's our permanent exhibit gallery. Like I said, it goes over a lot of the history of the region and how we got here, how people learned how to survive and also how to thrive. But the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center is more than that too. One of the things that really attracted me personally and professionally to Enid and to the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center a couple of years ago wasn't just the fact that it's a beautiful museum, because it is, but also what we also have on our site as well, which is the Humphrey Heritage Village. It is a living history village full of 4 different historic buildings from the territorial days. We have this one right here is the Turkey Creek School. It's a one-room schoolhouse that we still have. It's a one-room schoolhouse where we still have programs, one-room schoolhouse programs that we do there on site. So we have 3rd, 4th grade kids coming from all over the region to participate in this program. We have they do it in character, in the period. So you have a school marm that's giving lessons just like they would have, more than 100 years ago in this school. And it's kind of interesting too, because I had a lady that was visiting the Heritage Center just a couple of days ago, and she was talking about, she's a school teacher. She brings her kids to this school program, and she went to the same school program when she was a little, and her father actually attended this very school when he was growing up. So it's literally several generations of memories that are in this building. And probably the if anyone was to ask me the single most interesting piece in our collection at the Heritage Center, it's actually not a normal artifact. It's actually a building. It's this one right here. This is the U.S. Land Office. All right, so I mentioned the Cherokee Outlet Land Run. The Cherokee Outlet Land Run, in all of Oklahoma history, there were 5 different land runs. There were a couple of different other kinds of land openings, some land lotteries and some sealed bids, ways of distributing land in a somewhat fair or reasonable manner. But of the 5 land runs that occurred in Oklahoma history, the Cherokee outlet land opening was the biggest as far as land that was becoming available. And for example, the Cherokee outlet land opening was split up into 4 different land districts. So there was in the far west, you had the Woodward land district, the Alva land district, the Enid land district, and then the Perry land district. So for example, in our the land run of 1893, there were 4 different land offices. And there were, like I said, this was the 4th of 5 different land runs in Oklahoma. But anyway, this land office, as far as we know, is the only surviving land office from any Oklahoma land run in all of Oklahoma history. So it is a literal one-of-a-kind piece of Oklahoma history. And it was almost discovered a little bit by accident. It wasn't, we have records of where the land office was historically. It was on the south side of the downtown square in Enid. And it was there for a number of years until the 19-teens or so. And then it just kind of disappeared. And we didn't know what happened to it until about the late 80s, early 90s. It was discovered that it had been moved. The building had been moved from its location, and it was a house that someone had been living in for years. And it was discovered what it was, saved and restored to what you see now out there in the village. So really what the village is, there are a number of other different buildings. This is the Glidewell House. It was built in, built as you see it now in about 1905. It had a couple of other different iterations earlier on in its life. But the Glidewell House here, we have the village church, which was one of the first Episcopal churches in Enid. All of these buildings, they represent something very important to me, which is historic preservation. These are all pieces of history that were saved. People deemed them to be important. They're part of our identity here in northwestern Oklahoma. And all of these buildings are representative of a different slice of life. And that's why I love the Humphrey Heritage Village, because of all of these buildings that are out there. So that kind of leads to some of our programs. We use the Humphrey Heritage Village quite a bit for programming. One of our favorite things that we do here is we actually use the village as a true living history village. We have living history interpreters where we dress in the period clothing of the time. And we do living history programs there on Saturdays. So we literally, the story of our museum is a story of people. And we use the opportunity with the Humphrey Heritage Village to the story of people. How was it that people lived in that time? How was it different to what we know today? How did things change? All of these things are important to why it is that we got here to this point today. Part of our region's success. And so it's important that we know and understand our historic roots and how we got to that point. This is these are all photos of one of our programs. Like I said, this living history program, we call it History Alive on the Cherokee Strip. It's a living history program that we do here. And we do everything from, different cowboys that might have been connected to the Chisholm Trail. So that's another thing too one of my favorite things to mention as visitors are coming through and taking a tour of the village. There is a sitting on the steps of the land office. I asked the question, why is Enid where it is? Why here? Why not 20 miles down the road? Why not? Why was it here specifically? And there are 2 reasons why that is the case. Well, really 3 reasons, but from standing on the steps of the land office, that you can see 2 of them. One of them is the land office itself. It was determined that wherever the land office was going to be, there was going to be a town that grew around it. But also we are right, our site, the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center, is right on the Chisholm Trail, literally right next door to us, right next to that the land office is Government Springs Park, which was it still is a spring-fed pond that was a stop on the Chisholm Trail, the watering hole on the Chisholm Trail. So, you know, these highways and byways that existed for a long time before the land run happened, kind of already had these passages where transportation and trade had been happening for a long time. Railroads that went through here as well. That's another big reason. But like I said, these living history programs that we do are a lot of fun. People love to come and tour and get to know and join in on some of the activities that we have, whether it be just us demonstrating what life was like, or actually joining into some like hands-on learning experiences. So there's a lot of things that we do on those Saturdays. The History Live on the Cherokee Strip is something that we do every first and third Saturday of the month. And we usually try to have a handful of living history interpreters that are there on site out in the village, showing you what life was like in the turn of the century Oklahoma territory. So that's one of the programs that we do. But more to the point of what is coming up very soon that we are very excited about. It's one of our favorite events that we do here at the Heritage Center. And we take that Humphrey Heritage Village and turn it into a kind of a Victorian Christmas experience. So we call it Christmas in the Village. And we decorate all of the buildings inside and out with different kinds of Christmas decorations. And it's a really cool experience where we have choirs that come sing Christmas carols. We have all sorts of ornament making stations and ornaments that would have been similar to what or decorations that they might have done at the time. Lots of things that are a lot of fun for people to do. So this is, like I said, this is one of our favorite things to do, the Christmas in the Village. We do tours of all the historic buildings with our living history, interpreters as well. So Christmas in the Village is December 10th, Friday, December 10th, from 6 to 9 p.m. So that's something that you won't want to miss. There are many reasons to come and visit Enid all the time, for that matter, but especially in Christmas. I'm sure most of you are aware and have probably heard the news. We have in Enid one of the world's largest live Christmas tree, 140 feet tall, right in the middle of our downtown in Enid. So right there next to it is a ice skating rink there in downtown Enid. And then this is just another one of those reasons that like Enid is a can't miss Christmas stop that you don't want to miss. So the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center is a lot of things. It's a place that tells the story of who we are as a people, but it tells the story of the region, and it's a story of people. And so I want the Heritage Center to continue to be this community hub where people from the region can gather and share and celebrate the stories that make up our history of who we are. So everyone, thank you so much for having me. I hope I didn't talk too long or not enough, either way. I am completely open to questions if we do have time. So Ron, thank you so much for having me on the program today.
Absolutely, Jake. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Very, very interesting and informative to me. One of our partners, Lonnie Steben, noted in the chat that Jesse Chisholm himself was of Cherokee descent, and you set that stage, that context, explaining how the Cherokee people were relocated, some moving to Arkansas, for example, which is what Jesse Chisholm did with his mother, I believe, early on. So there's a Cherokee connection, as well as the fact that the trail came right there through Enid. And by the way, there's a really neat display of metal cutouts of longhorn steers, cowboys, Indians. Is that Government Springs Park or somewhere downtown there?
Yeah, that's right there in Government Springs Park, which is literally right in our backyard. So,
and that's worth a stop just to see it in itself. Gene has a question in your history of oil discovery and development. What about the role of the Indian people? Because that was a remarkable dynamic as that happened. Is there material in the exhibit there?
We don't have a lot that actually discusses that, honestly. So it's kind of I'm glad he brought this up. We have our current exhibits now, the Heritage Center as it's known today. There has been a museum that's been on our site since the early 1970s. Before that, it was actually a zoo, which is another funny story. But it was the Museum of the Cherokee Strip, and there are in northwestern Oklahoma, the old Cherokee outlet. There is a Cherokee Strip museum in just about every town. Perry has one, Enid has one, Alva has one. I think Arkansas City up in Kansas has one. I know there's a couple of others out there too. But the people of Enid kind of came together to raise a lot of money and partner with the Oklahoma Historical Society to really elevate the museum into what it is now, the Heritage Center. And so the exhibits that we have right now that are on exhibit are about 10 years old. We opened to the public in April of 2011. So one of the things that we're kind of quietly working on in the background is, what does that look like? We need to rework our exhibits and maybe work on our permanent exhibits and tell different stories. What are things that we missed along the way that we need to add to the story? Different people's perspectives, that sort of thing. Lots of different things that we can cover. And so the role of the whole idea of the land run and what happened after it, who owned the land before, who had rights to it, how that changed over time. It's very complex, and there's a lot of different players that come into the picture, different people groups. We want to explore that a little bit more. And so that's one of the things that we want to do. And so the Native perspective is one of those that we have a little bit on those topics, but not as much as I would like to see. So we're currently working on that. We're hoping to build some partnerships with other people and to create some of those stories. But I know that's going to be a very interesting topic coming forward, specifically about natives and the indigenous peoples and oil itself, with the Killers of the Flower Moon that's about to be released.
That's a great point. Yeah, we ought to talk about that too sometime. So there were 5 different land rushes. I certainly did not know that. Gary asks, did all those occur during the 1890s? Although the one in September 1893 was the largest and most significant. So when did those other land rushes occur? And do you have any recommended readings about the Oklahoma land rushes?
So most of them happened in the 1890s, yes. The first one was in 1889. That's the one of the unassigned lands, which is kind of right smack dab in the middle of the state of Oklahoma. So Guthrie, all those places in the middle of the state, that was part of that first land run of 1889. There were, like I said, the last one, the biggest was ours in 1893 as far as land that was available. But yeah, most of them happened in the 1890s. And ours was, it was really, 1893, it was really determined that, okay, there had been problems with things like Sooners, people coming and starting the land run, going forward and crossing the lines and claiming land before they were supposed to, cheaters, basically. There was a real problem with Soonerism in a lot of the other land runs. They tried to combat it a little bit more in this one. but it was kind of a mess. And so they didn't do, they did one more after this one, 1894, but there were other land openings that happened up until the turn of the century too. So there was some sealed bids and some other ways that they distributed land to the public. And as far as books about the land runs, there are a number of books. One of them that I kind of liked, it has some problems, but it's one that I still like to read because it has a little bit of first person experience. There was a Pulitzer Prize winning author at the time, Marquis James, and he wrote a book on the Cherokee Strip land opening. He was a child when it happened, so he has some remembrance of it. So that's one that I like to go back to. There's a number that are in our gift shop too that are adjacent to it, but there's not a ton of secondary sources on the land runs itself. That is kind of a hole I think that some historians need to step up and do a little bit more scholarly work on, honestly. But okay. I see Mike Sheriff asked, what exhibits do you have currently in the special exhibit room? Well, right now, during our Christmas season, we just have a photo exhibit that's up now, just different Christmas scenes across Enid over time. So there's a lot of historic photographs that we have. It's mostly we're keeping it open because we're about to do a big exhibit coming up in January on the history of orphan trains. It is kind of one of those things that's often forgot about, how it happened, how orphans found homes, but there was literally trains that went from town to town with orphans, and you would, try to claim children. And so we're going to have a whole exhibit that we're going to be starting to build in-house, actually starting pretty darn quick. So that one will be opening in January. So a lot of things coming up. You can always follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and then of course, check out our website, csrhc.org.
I hope it's okay, Jake. I went ahead and put your email address in the chat absolutely. For those who want to follow up with you.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. Are there any other questions? If not, it looks like it's going to be a great event in Enid for Christmas in the Village, and a whole lot more going on, and more things to look forward to visiting Enid to see. So how about a virtual round of applause for Jake and the good folks at the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thanks for having me on too. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jake. So for our folks, this is the end of year one of Cattle Trails Showcase. Should we continue? Should we keep going? We believe that there's a whole lot of attractions to be found along these trails. Thanks for that thumbs up. So we plan to continue. We'll be airing Cattle Trails Showcase on the second Friday of each month. So for next month, that would be Friday, January 8th, 2022. Can you believe I'm saying 2022 at 10 a.m. So thanks for your support. And we hope you have a blessed holiday. So to close our program today, this is Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate, saying thanks for taking time to join us in this place, and come on back next month for our Cattle Trails Showcase. Happy trails, everyone. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Hey, Ron, what's the status of the historic trails legislation in Congress now?
Question about the status of the historic trails legislation. Hearings have been held at the subcommittee level in both the Senate and in the House. And so the next step would be committee action. As of this moment, no committee markup or committee work session has been scheduled on that legislation, but that would be the next step, and we hope it happens soon. Thanks for checking.
Nice to see you, Ron. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.